What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here with another Star Wars Unlimited video. This time we have an exciting look at some of the first cards from the Shadows of the Galaxy set. Let's go ahead and take a look. So first up, we have Moff Gideon, Formidable Commander. This is one of the new leaders that we have available in the set. Sorry for the slightly low resolution image there. These are kind of early preview images. So he is a command villainy leader focusing on small units. His ability is action, attack with a unit that costs 3 or less. If it's attacking a unit, it gets +1/+0 for this attack. So this is kind of similar to Jyn Erso's ability, where it is a action that benefits you when you're fighting units against other units. But while Jyn makes it so that your unit takes less damage, Gideon makes it so that your unit deals more damage. So interesting thing there. I think overall this is not a ramp deck, despite being command villainy. It will likely focus on cheaper units. He deploys early. I don't think you'll probably be running ramp stuff at all. You know, maybe you do run like Super Laser Technician, but resupply seems like a miss here. Another interesting thing about this guy is that Imperial Remnant isn't a separate trait. And this might be very helpful in terms of enabling synergies, because the Rebel faction, so the Rebels kind of turn into the New Republic, and we've already seen at least one New Republic card with the one New Republic card that we've seen being the Vanguard Ace. And if we see more cards that are Rebels in this era, they may have the New Republic trait instead, and thus not synergize with cards like Fleet Lieutenant or Wing Leader, while Imperial cards, because Remnant isn't its own trait, might be better suited for combining with some of the Spark of Rebellion synergies. So then when you deploy Gideon on 5 resources, he is a 3/6 with Overwhelm, and each friendly unit that costs 3 or less gets +1 power and gains Overwhelm when attacking an enemy unit. So it's kind of an interesting stat line. This is the same as what you get with Leia Organa, Alliance General. She has Raid while he does not. He has Overwhelm instead, and honestly, Leia's Raid is probably more valuable than Gideon's Overwhelm. Overwhelm on a unit with only 3 power isn't great, though it could help if he's buffed. He also does give a buff and Overwhelm to all cheap units, at least when they're fighting against other units. And the Overwhelm sharing might help make up for the fact that this deck actually isn't very aggro. So you might think, oh, a leader that buffs cheap units and makes them hit harder, that sounds like a good aggro deck. But the thing is, since he only buffs them in combat against other units, that's not really what aggro usually wants to be doing. However, the Overwhelm here, as well as the extra power, might help make up for that by doing some more damage to the base, even when doing that unit combo. Like the unit combat rather, and like his leader side, Gideon on the unit side is focused on conducting unit combat with cheap cards. He does also have the Imperial and Official traits. The Official trait synergizes with Emperor's Royal Guard, allowing it to gain Sentinel, so that might be a nice inclusion in the same aspects there. Overall, I feel that Gideon is not necessarily the strongest looking leader at first glance. We'll have to see what other synergies and stuff he has, but as it stands, the fact that his ability only applies when attacking enemy units seems kind of narrow. And Jyn Erso hasn't seen a ton of success in Constructed, though I'm sure that there's still like a lot of testing to be done in terms of finding specific combinations and so on. So for Gideon, you know, we'll have to see, but personally, at least at first glance, he doesn't look as strong as someone like Tarkin to me. But I could be wrong, so we'll have to see. We'll have to see how he pans out. Next up, we have our other starter set leader, the Mandalorian, Sworn to the Creed. He is a cunning heroism leader, and he's focused on upgrades. When you play an upgrade, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP. This is really interesting. It exhausts based on HP, not on cost. So Gideon buffed low cost units. The Mandalorian exhausts low HP units. This does mean that he can exhaust even a powerful late game unit or even a leader in the right situation. And another interesting thing is that because this occurs when you play an upgrade, you don't have to do a separate action to exhaust, so it doesn't lose you tempo. This is kind of a downside that we saw with Grand Admiral Thrawn, where using his exhaust ability costs tempo. With the Mandalorian, because it's a bonus that you get when you play something else, you're not using a separate action for it, which is good. It seems especially good with cards like Snapshot Reflexes, which, fittingly features the Mandalorian on the card art. And notably, it doesn't trigger from Experience and Shields, because Experience and Shields are upgrades that you get, but you do not play them. So, because of that, you don't get a free exhaust when you play a wing leader or something with this guy. And he deploys on 6 resources over to this leader side. So he is a 4/7, and when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust an enemy unit with 6 or less remaining HP. So that is a big boost to the exhaust ability. The 4/7 stat line at 6 resources is overall on curve. These are the same stats that we've seen with leaders like Luke Skywalker, Faithful Friend, and Jyn Erso. It's a stronger version of the exhaust ability as well, which is actually really good. Like a lot of units have 6 or less remaining, or 6 like total maximum HP, and this is going to be able to exhaust most things in the game, including a lot of leaders when they're at full health. He also has the Mandalorian and Bounty Hunter traits, which may see some synergies in the set. I think that this deck is likely going to want to have some upgrades that stay relevant into late game, because you'll want to be playing upgrades to get value out of this ability. I'm wondering if this may be a new sort of Voltron leader option. So Voltron is a card game archetype. It's a reference to the old Voltron TV show, and it refers to a deck that tries to put a lot of upgrades on one unit to make it very powerful. And that has existed in various games. You can actually do it to some degree here in Star Wars Unlimited with Chirrut Imwe or with Chewbacca. And I think Voltron would be fitting here too, especially given those early episodes of The Mandalorian where he's trying to upgrade all his armor to be made out of Beskar and stuff. You really get that sense of like, oh, this guy's already dangerous and he's getting fully geared up. So fitting way to have some of that synergy in the game where you can upgrade this guy further and get a little bonus for doing so. Okay. So next up, we have Calculated Lethality. This is a 4-cost tactic event in Vigilance Villainy. Defeat a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less. For each upgrade that was on that unit, give an experience token to a friendly unit. So this is another Vigilance Villainy removal event. It has an interesting twist, though. This is the first cost-based removal that we've seen in the game thus far. So other removal cards have been based on HP, either directly or indirectly. So some cards just do damage. Others are like, defeat a unit that has X HP or less. This is the first one that defeats based on cost, and therefore it's really good against upgraded small units. So it answers Wing Leader extremely well in particular. So let's say, your opponent they lead off with A-Wing, then they play Wing Leader, buff the A-Wing with 2 experience. Next turn, if you play Calculated Lethality on that A-Wing, you defeat it, and because there were 2 upgrades on the A-Wing in the form of those 2 experience tokens, you get to give 2 experience tokens to a friendly unit. That's a lot of value. So you do have to have a friendly unit in play to get maximum value. So if you're playing like a super hard control deck that has few units, it's not going to be as good. But you can also just use this to pick off an annoying 3-drop unit. Even if it doesn't have upgrades, you can just play it as straight removal. You won't get experience tokens yourself, but it could easily be like sort of another takedown or a different version of takedown. It synergizes well with Gideon, I think, because you can use this to buff some of the small units that you've played earlier, which then work with Gideon's leader and leader unit abilities. So overall, this seems like a pretty solid removal option. I think a lot of decks would already like to play this card, quite frankly, especially given the major threat that we're already seeing with stuff like Green Squadron A-Wing into Wing Leader, Sabine Wren Explosives Artist into Wing Leader, things like Metal Ceremony. There are already a fair few upgrades that are often used on small units, most notably just like experience and shields, but this provides a solid answer. Okay, next up, we're going to look at Razor Crest. I almost said Razor Quest. Razor Crest Reliable Gunship. So this is it's a solid unit in my opinion. It is a Vigilance Heroism unit. The stats are on curve, 4-cost, 3/4 in the Space Arena. Restore 2 offers major potential for healing if the opponent doesn't counter it, and that can actually be a ton of value. We've already seen cards like Yoda or Kanan that can be pretty annoying for aggro decks to deal with because they represent repeated repeated healing for the base HP as long as they aren't answered. The Razor Crest doesn't have Sentinel, but I think it's still strong against aggro because of the stats and Restore, and I think it actually compares favorably in a lot of situations to cards like System Patrolcraft. So System Patrolcraft's a 4-cost 3/4 with Sentinel. Razor Crest, 4-cost 3/4 with Restore 2, I would probably rather have that than the 4-cost 3/4 Sentinel in a lot of situations, because if the opponent is on the ground and not in space, having a Restore ship still helps counter aggro, while having a Sentinel ship does not. And then the crazy thing is, in addition to those stats and Restore, which I think would already be quite playable, the Razor Crest also allows you to return an upgrade from your discard pile to your hand. Now, you might not always have an upgrade in your discard pile when you're playing this, but the stats and Restore are good enough on their own, and if you get an upgrade back that you can then get major value out of from, it's a big bonus. So overall, this seems like a really solid card. I again think that a lot of decks would already be interested in playing this, and so having it as something that has potential synergies that we still haven't seen seems like a really good position to be in. All right. Next up, we have the Phase 3 Dark Trooper, 3-cost command villainy unit, 3/3 Imperial Droid and Trooper. It has Sentinel. It gains an experience if it survives combat damage. So when combat damage is dealt to this unit, give an experience token to this unit if it survives the damage. And this works both on offense and on defense. So if you use this unit to attack a small enemy unit and you take, 1 or 2 damage in return, you get an experience for the future. Or if your opponent attacks into you with a smaller unit, you again get experience. Now, this ability is often going to do nothing, because there are going to be a lot of situations where you just die in one attack, or you die to something that doesn't do combat damage, or whatever it is. A lot of the time, this doesn't do anything. But also, like Razor Crest, this card is good enough without it. So people already play Cell Block Guard, which is 3-cost 3/3 Sentinel with the Imperial Trooper traits and just villainy. This card is Cell Block Guard, but with upside. In the situation where you do get that free experience, you're just getting a straight bonus over Cell Block Guard. Additionally, it's a green unit, it does mean fewer decks can run it, but in some decks that's actually a positive trait, because it means that you will get healing from Colonel Yularen. It means that you will allow Escort Skiff to have ambush. So overall, I consider this to be a strong upgrade to Cell Block Guard, which is honestly kind of crazy, because Cell Block Guard is a card that sees competitive play in constructed builds today. And this card is an immediate straight replacement for, I think, a lot of those builds. In fact, basically any deck that's running Command Villainy would rather have this than Cell Block Guard at present. Maybe there's going to be something that's good against droids in the future, and that will be a vulnerability for this card, but as it stands, this is a substantial upgrade to Cell Block Guard for Command Villainy decks, and I expect it would see a lot of play. I think it would immediately go in a bunch of constructed decks if it were released today. So very cool looking card. Next up, Grogu Irresistible, one of the most popular characters from the Mandalorian TV show. 2-cost cunning heroism unit. He is a 0/5 and has the Force trait. But as an action, he can exhaust any enemy unit, and it works on leaders. So this guy's a utility unit. He's a support piece, but that utility and support that he provides is really strong. He also has the Force trait, which means that a bunch of Force cards now have their synergies enabled. So for instance, if you have this guy in play, you can now play It Binds All Things and get not just the healing, but also the damage. Or you can play a Force Throw and do the damage with that card as well. So this is probably the best early Force enabler that we've seen thus far. His main weakness is that the lack of any attack power at all means that anything attacks it for free. But this could be mitigated. You could put Sentinel on it, you could put upgrades on it, you could try and get the initiative and exhaust them before they attack you. Overall, this seems to me to be a really good card, and it might work especially well with the Mandalorian, fittingly enough, because he has those synergies with upgrades that you might want to use in order to give this guy the ability to defend himself a bit more. Overall seems honestly really strong to me. Really cool card. I think this will see a bunch of play, but we'll have to see. Next up, the Mandalorian's Rifle. So this is actually the first heroism only upgrade that we've seen in the game. Other upgrades have had different aspect combinations. It's a 3-cost for +3 power, but it also has a strong removal effect if you attach it to the Mandalorian. When played, if attached unit is the Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit. Put the captured card face down under him until he leaves play. This is the first time that we've seen the capture mechanic in the game. It's one of 3 new mechanics introduced in this set, the others being Bounty and Smuggler, I believe. I don't think we've seen any cards with Smuggler yet, but there will be a card with Bounty that will be shown later in this video. Anyway, so capture, put the captured card face down under your unit until your unit leaves play. So this is similar to cards like Detention Sphere in Magic the Gathering, which was also a card. I think it was an enchantment that removed something, and then if your enchantment was destroyed, they got it back. Um, and I think this is a good form of removal. It also works on anything, so you can actually use this. I mean, maybe we'll see, maybe they'll say ships can't be captured or something. I don't know. We'll have to see like the rulebook entry. But at least based on what it says on the card, you could use this and capture like Devastator or some other extremely powerful unit if the situation came about. Now, the downside of this sort of thing though is even though it's really good value removal for the price, it comes at the high risk of if the Mandalorian then gets defeated and they get their unit back, all of a sudden you've kind of reversed a fair bit. The fact that it only buffs power and not HP is a bit anti-synergistic with that unit capture because if it were to buff eight, like if this were +0 +3 and it buffed your HP more than your power, it might actually be better, at least in terms of it being a removal card, because it would make it harder for them to remove your unit and thereby unlock the unit that had, or jailbreak or whatever the guy that had previously been captured. So that being said, I think it overall still seems very strong. 3 cost for +3 power on your leader and then removing something is honestly pretty good. And I think this card's very interesting. It will also work with not just the Mandalorian, the leader, but also the Mandalorian unit. There's a separate unit that we will show later in this presentation that it also synergizes with. So yeah, interesting first showing for the capture mechanic. I do also think that you will, even though it does work on both the leader unit and the normal unit, I think using it on a leader unit is probably going to be better, just because leader units are immune to a bunch of removal things that affect normal units, and it's more important than usual to have your guy be resistant to removal if removing him would also get the other player a card back. So for that reason, I think that playing it on a unit that can't be the target of Vanquish or Waylay or whatever seems like an interesting point. Okay. So next up we have Wanted. This is a 0 cost attachment that puts a bounty on a unit. A little typo in the presentation where I said butting a bounty on a unit. That is not correct. So you can play this on a friendly unit or an enemy unit, but the bounty is only awarded to the unit's opponent when the unit is defeated or captured. It's not the controller of whatever defeated or captured them. I had thought for a moment there would be like a funny combination where you could put a bounty on your own guy and then remove him with something like Vader or Palpatine to score the bounty yourself, but that's not really possible. The bounty here readies 2 resources. This is interestingly basically the same as Boba Fett collecting the bounty's leader ability. I don't think that's an incredibly valuable bounty, but this still seems like a card that could be quite playable in some builds. Most notably, if you play this in the Mandalorian, you also get to exhaust. So you can play this as a 0 cost exhaust effect, which is really good, and then get some extra value out of it by taking out the attached unit and readying up some resources. So interesting card, can kind of enable some big turns similar to Boba. Hard to say if it'll prove strong enough outside the Mandalorian. For the Mandalorian himself, I think it'll be really good. Also, just an interesting new mechanic. Sorry about that, guys. I had a little bit of hiccups there, but we're gonna move on. Next up, we have the Mandalorian. Wherever I go, he goes. 6 cost, 5/6, and he is a Vigilance Heroism unit. He has Sentinel, and when played, you may heal all damage from a unit that costs 2 or less, and give 2 shield tokens to it. 5/6 stat line at 6 resources. This is basically on curve for most 6-cost units, but he also has Sentinel, which is rare and good. Most Sentinel units have below curve stats. He's honestly pretty strong, even if this one play doesn't do anything. So you can compare this to Obi-Wan Kenobi, to the Academy Defense Walker, to Bendu. I like these stats more than the stats on those other units. He also can heal and double shield a small unit, which is potentially huge value, especially if that unit's been buffed. Works great with Grogu, which, figures. Works great with upgraded small units, which also synergizes with the Mandalorian leader's overall stuff. And as a whole, I think he looks like a very strong option. Now, it's worth noting that this card is going to be a legendary. So this card's a legendary. I'm going to backtrack a bit. Wanted is a common, but the other cards that I've shown in this video are actually going to be starter set cards. So for picking up that 2-player starter. But yeah, I think the Mandalorian, wherever I go, he goes, is looking like a very strong card. And I would already be interested in testing it out in various builds. So I think that there's a good chance that we'll see a fair bit of him in the future. All right. And so here we have the new experience and shield tokens, which honestly look really cool. And they are the same as the previous ones, but they have a different visual effect to match the theme of the set. And that is just a nice little thing that they added. There's one card that I forgot to put in this presentation, I believe, which is a little unfortunate, and that is Gideon's Light Cruiser. Unless I accidentally skipped it. Nope, I think I just didn't put it in. So Gideon's Light Cruiser is basically a bad version of Home One that works for Moff Gideon. I don't think it's very good. Um, sorry for the very brief review there. I think it's 8 cost, 7, 8, overwhelm. And if you have Gideon, you can either put a 3 or less cost villainy unit from your discard into play, or you can play one from hand for free. This is like Home One's ability, but worse. It also doesn't have the restore. It also only works with Gideon. I don't think it's very good. I could be wrong. Yeah, that said, that's going to about do it for this one, guys. If you have any other questions or thoughts about any of the units that I have shown here, I would be curious to hear them. If you think my take is totally wrong and Grogu's horrible or Gideon's ship is amazing or whatever it is, I would be, I'd be interested to hear that. But yeah, overall, it was exciting to see these new cards. I honestly didn't expect them to have anything from this set previewed for quite some time. I was thinking it would be like another month and then we would see just a few, but they've started the previews earlier than expected, and I am yeah, I'm here to provide coverage and stuff on it. So I think this is exciting stuff, and I'll be curious to see where it goes in the future. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.